Welcome to today's webinar on voice banking. For this webinar, we have English and Spanish captions available. If you're joining us live on Zoom, please check the chat box as we're adding the instructions right now. And if you're watching the recording, you will find the instructions in the video description on how to activate the subtitles. I want to add that our presentations are live and we may encounter some glitches with tech, as we all have on Zoom over the last couple of years. Please be patient with our presenters as we work through anything unexpected. I want to also thank our sponsor, Biogen, without whom this webinar series would not be possible. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kathy Cummings, Executive Director of the International Alliance of ALS-MND Association. And today I'm joined by an incredible panel who will discuss the very interesting topic of voice banking. Voice banking is not yet a technology that's available everywhere in the world, but as a global organization, we want to offer this webinar to offer a better understanding of how this technology works and what needs to be considered. And of course, our wish is that it becomes available everywhere on the globe. What a wonderful panel. Our moderator today is Sara Feldman. She's a physical therapist and assistive technology professional at the MDA ALS Center of Hope at Temple University Lewis Katz School of Medicine, where she's been serving people with ALS-MND for more than 25 years. In addition to clinical care, she's involved in clinical trials, education, and the use of assistive technology. And Sara is the clinical liaison for the ALS Hope Foundation in Philadelphia. Let me introduce you to our panel as well. We have Norman MacIsaac, who's a person living with ALS, and long before his ALS turned his world upside down, Norman MacIsaac used to travel the world, supporting local efforts to fight poverty and injustice. He has lived and worked in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and he's been a leader in the field of international development and a critical voice arguing against top-down development. He truly is a global citizen. Norman has been on the board of directors of ALS Quebec for over 7 years, the ALS Canada Advocacy Committee for over 6 years, and a member of the Alliance PCAC. He's been participating in the ALS caucus since 2015 and has been a vocal advocate through media and through his website, which is www.morethanals.com, since his diagnosis in 2014. Norm lives in Montreal with his wife of 35 years, and he has 2 sons and 1 daughter. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Norman this morning about voice banking. Alicia Gibb has worked with clients with progressive neurological conditions, including MND, for over 15 years. And Alicia commenced in the role of FlexEquip team leader at MND New South Wales in January 2022. Prior to starting at FlexEquip, or as FlexEquip team leader, Alicia was a community occupational therapist at Liverpool Hospital for 14 years. So she brings a lot of expertise to this particular webinar this morning. Emily Kornman is a licensed and certified speech language pathologist. She works full-time for the Team Gleason Foundation in the United States and part-time in the medical acute care setting at Ochsner Medical Center and West Jefferson Medical Center, LCMC Health. Emily has been passionate about finding ways for individuals with communication challenges to communicate since she began utilizing AAC with individuals with autism and other neurodevelopment disorders. She now specializes in AAC primarily for adults with neurodegenerative diseases. And she is finding ways to make the world and the technology industry more inclusive and accessible for the individuals she works with. And last but not least, Monique Signorelli graduated as a speech pathologist from the University of Sydney in 2009. She has worked with clients who have neurological and neurodegenerative conditions for over 13 years. Monique has a special interest in MND and provides clinical expertise to clients within the community, Liverpool Hospital's MND clinic, and Southwest Sydney's communication and assistive technology clinic. She's involved in MND research and has presented at national and international conferences. So once again, welcome to our fabulous panel, and I will now turn it over to our moderator, Sara Feldman, for today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Welcome to everyone as well. just to let the people who have joined us know, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section and we will get to them at the end of the panelist discussion. We'd like to start with introducing Norm MacIsaac, who will present his perspectives on voice banking and his experience with it.
Morning. I have titled my talk to voice bank or not to voice bank. That is not the only question. I'd like to share 6 lessons learned or considerations when thinking about voice banking. First is that patients should start as early as possible, and that's self-explanatory. In my case, I didn't realize how damaged my voice was when I began voice banking. So always encourage your patients, your clients to start early. Second, encourage a discussion with loved one. Voice banking is a very time-consuming and energy-intensive activity, and the choice to voice bank or not is dependent on a number of factors, including how people perceive their progression. But I think one key aspect is to always have the discussion with family and friends. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the host asked a question to his guest. The question was, if you could have one capacity that you don't presently have, what would it be? For me, I was torn between the ability to walk or the ability to have my old voice back. But when I talked to my wife, her choice was clear. For her, my voice was the most important thing, and the thing she misses most, and the thing she will miss most once my voice is gone. Third, there are a number of options and quality consideration when voice banking. I opted for a model talker, which was free at the time. Now I think it cost $100. Acapella, which is purported to be good and possibly better than model talker, was considerably more costly. I also spoke about voice banking with my speech therapist, and we looked at options for voice banking my voice in French, and we looked at projects. But for example, Adobe's Vocal, which can build your voice through existing recording. So I gathered a couple of recordings of my voice to be able to develop my voice in French later. So fourth is that one aspect we do not discuss often enough is the challenge for those who speak several languages. I speak several languages myself and have chosen that the voices I would like to preserve are in English and French, but I could use the existing voices in other languages. But for example, a lot of people do not have access to voice banking in their language. And often this is also influenced by the ability of the user to type or to produce a written version of their text in their own language. And that, again, is easier in English than it is in Hindi, which has considerably more letters and symbols to add. Some people, for example, may speak Creole at home, but use French in their professional life. For them, there's a choice, but I don't think that voice banking exists in Creole. So maybe for that person, the option is to record a few key sentences in the Creole and to be able to voice bank in French. Fifth lesson learned is that don't let voice banking replace speech therapy. Do both and don't give up your own voice. Speech therapy has made a huge difference for me, and almost 8 years after my diagnosis, even though I sound a bit like a drunken Obama, I'm able to communicate my ideas to you. My sixth and final consideration or lesson learned is that there's a challenge of integrating my synthetic voice into my daily life. And that's often something we don't deal with until after we voice banked. For example, I use a wheelchair outside. I still transfer on my own and get up several times a day. So I can envisage having a tray on my wheelchair with the iPad. So I can still tap on my own, but to have a cumbersome screen in front of me would be a challenge. Finally, keep in mind that some people can type well, cannot type well, or are functionally illiterate. It can be embarrassing for someone to admit that when talking about voice banking. In conclusion, first of all, have these discussions early and start early. Second, there is no one size fits all answer for voice banking. It's very much an individual decision. In addition, technology is advancing so fast, and your OT or speech therapist might not be up to date on the advancements. In my case, I was told that I was the only patient who went through the process of voice banking. So obviously, there are many barriers. How you use that language in your life on your phone or your tablet, and how you type is the next challenge, and that has to be personalized. Finally, your voice is your identity. So please don't underestimate its importance for health patients, for health professionals. A lot of patients are overwhelmed by all of the choices and demands of the disease and just say no. I encourage your patients to discuss this with their loved one. Never underestimate the power of being able to say, I love you in your own voice. And maybe that is the minimum people should do, is to record their voice, telling people that they love them. For researchers out there, I would love to see a study comparing the experiences of patients and caregivers who've chosen to voice banking to those who've chosen to voice bank, and what influenced their decision and its perceived impact on their quality of life and even end of life quality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norman, for sharing your perspective and your 6 lessons learned, as you called them. I think hopefully we will be answering all of your questions and addressing all these issues in this presentation. But I just want to comment on how you mentioned that the voice was most important to your wife, and how you talked about getting your family involved. And I think that's, really important and something we always have to keep in mind. I think what we'd like to do, though, is start out with the basic question of what is voice banking? Let's start with that. And who is starting us off today? Is that Monique?
It is, yes. Hi. So our voice is like a fingerprint. It's unique, and it helps to identify who we are as a person. So unfortunately, many people with motor neuron disease will lose their ability to speak at some point throughout disease progression. And they may require a speech generating device to help them communicate. So voice banking is considered a proactive speech pathology intervention. It's a way of us preserving your voice. So it involves recording a person's natural speech before it becomes impaired. And these recordings are then used to create a personalized synthetic voice that sounds very similar to how your voice is. So these personalized synthetic voices can be uploaded into a speech generating device and used later down the track if need be to help you communicate. So these personalized synthetic voices are used instead of the generic voices that are currently available in speech generating devices. So you're probably familiar with the voices that are available on SatNav or Siri or the Stephen Hawkins voice. So rather than using those computer generated voices, you're going to be using your own personalized voice. So there's a number of different voice banking software available, and that will depend on where you are living in the world. So it would be really important to speak to your speech pathologist to see what you can access and what's going to best suit your needs. Here in Australia, we mostly use a cappella, so the My Own Voice, and the modal talker. So it would be good to speak to your speech pathologist and see whether you meet the criteria for voice banking and which software is going to best suit your needs.
Thank you so much. And Alicia, as an occupational therapist, how does this tie in with your work as well?
So from an occupational therapy point of view, we're always looking at enabling people to be as independent as possible, as well as improving quality of life. And as Norman touched on, your voice is your unique identity, and being able to be you has a big impact on a person's quality of life. So voice and message banking is just one way that we look at enabling someone to be as independent as possible and be them as much as they can be themselves and their own personality. So from an OT point of view, that may be looking at mounting of the technology. So if a person can't hold a microphone, for instance, that may be how can we mount a microphone? How can we use alternative mics? So like a headset like I'm wearing now rather than holding a mic. And then looking at ways of integrating and working with the speech pathologist to achieve the best possible outcome for the person.
Right, right. And Norman touched on that when he mentioned about his transfers, and he didn't want to have something right in front of him. So that is incredibly important. Now, voice banking, voice messaging, these terms seem to get thrown around. Are they interchangeable? Emily, can you tell us a little bit more about what is voice banking versus what is voice messaging?
Yes, absolutely. So Monique set it up perfectly. You did a wonderful job of voice banking, so thank you. Like she was saying, voice banking, the outcome is a synthetic voice that can be used on most devices, and it can really say anything that you type out in a voice that's very similar to your own voice. We don't always know what we're going to say, so we do need something that's so flexible and can read out anything we say similar to us. Now, because it's so flexible, it's not going to completely match our emotion and tone. It's going to be more of flat and quality. So we'll sound like you, but it won't go up and down like when you're excited or upset. Because of that, we want to do message banking as well. So voice banking is the first process we talked about. And now we're going to talk a little bit about message banking. Message banking is a beautiful way to capture who you truly are. It's a way of having control over how you sound to the world. For example, if I'm really excited and passionate about a topic, I want everyone around me to know that I am passionate. So my voice is going to go up. I might talk a little bit faster. Or if I'm really upset with how I'm being treated and, like the medical care I'm receiving, I would want that to come across in my voice. So all of that can be done through capturing in digital recordings how you actually sound. So voice banking, the first one, can be done in about 50 phrases, and then it's completely done. You don't have to go back and record anymore. Message banking, you're going to record as you go in your natural environment, and it'll sound more authentic because you're recording it with your loved ones present. You might work with your family to find out what makes me me. What do I say that whenever I say this, you know exactly what I mean by it. It's really a more personalized process with everyone that you love, and you can do it as long as you want. So as long as you're still speaking, you're going to be saying messages that you want to record. And so it might take 1 to 10 months or maybe 2-3 years. Hopefully you're able to continue talking for a very long time and continue message banking. That's just kind of a broad overview, but I'm happy to answer more questions later.
No, that was excellent. And Norman again had touched on it when he said, as far as voice messaging, I love you in his own voice. And he talked about some other things that he thought was important, and the timing, and that starting as early as possible. Monique, can you also touch on that? And in your experience, what should the timing be for considering this voice banking?
Yeah, so absolutely. So early intervention is considered essential for patients with motor neuron disease. So really voice banking and message banking should be completed as soon as possible after a person has been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And that's because we want to capture a person's speech and their voice before it becomes impaired. So ideally, we want to get their normal speech rate, we want to get their normal speech quality, and also their normal speech clarity. So we want them to be understood. It is still possible to do voice banking and message banking if a person does have impaired speech. However, you need to be aware that it's not going to lead to a new or an improved voice. The voice is going to be exactly as it is at that particular moment in time.
Yes, and I think there's going to be some questions about that as well as how is voice banking done then? So Emily, do you want to go back and tell us a little bit more about that piece, like exactly how is voice banking accomplished?
Yes, and maybe we should start with a video that shows the difference between voice banking and message banking.
My voice is everything. Speaking was my way of connecting deeply with others in conversation, especially those I love the most. It's wonderful for my voice to match what I hear in my head.
That is one of the wonderful people that I'm so lucky to work with. So I don't know if y'all heard the change in the what, but that was actually a banked message that he recorded. And if you use a website like mymessagebanking.com or PRC Saltillo's message banking website, you can actually integrate your banked messages with your synthetic voice. So it adds the tone within your whatever you type out. So how is voice banking done? Like I mentioned earlier, it will depend on which service you use, but some of them can be done in just 50 phrases, like a cappella. VoiceKeeper will be around 50 to 350, depending on how many you want to record. So overall, the amount of phrases that you do record will differ based on the service. But you no longer need to record in a soundproof booth, which is really great. You can record at home for most services. Some only require a cell phone, and some do require a laptop and headset to get the best quality. And they will tell you exactly the phrases to say. Once you record those phrases, then the company itself will create that synthetic voice. So that is voice banking. Another way to complete voice banking and receive a synthetic voice is through a process called double dipping. Double dipping is when someone would record around between 550 to 800 banked messages, and then you can use those banked messages to create a synthetic voice. So some people might ask, well, why would I do that much work? Well, the outcome is you have all of these wonderful, beautiful banked messages, and then it actually creates a better, higher quality synthetic voice because you're using those personal banked messages to create that synthetic voice. So you kind of get two for the price of one. And that price of one is a little bit higher because you do have to record more messages. But again, if you have someone who's super motivated, has a ton of family support, and they have a while to record, those banked messages kind of just flow in. So you can get a lot of them pretty quickly. And that's overall the process. Again, it will differ based on which service you use, but we're happy to answer questions about that.
There is a question that came in that I thought might just fit right in here, as far as if the person didn't do the voice banking, previously. I know we had someone in our clinic on yesterday whose brother was going to do the voice banking for him because their voices were similar. Is that an option then? What can people do if they haven't done it ahead of time?
Absolutely. So that would be referred to as voice banking by proxy. And that means that someone who has a similar voice to yours will bank their voice and then you can use it. And they would just follow the same process that the individual that has ALS would follow as well, or MND. The other option is if someone has old recordings of their voice, sometimes they have so many voicemails that they left people that you can actually create a voice from that as well. We have quite a few people that we did that for, or they have like a really good quality presentation that they've recorded at one point in time.
Thank you. And Norman also mentioned, he speaks English, he speaks French. What languages is this voice banking and voice messaging? I guess you can do whatever language you want, but the voice banking done in. And Monique, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So the message banking can be completed in any language because it's a matter of recording your speech and playing that back exactly how it is. With voice banking, though, unfortunately, it is quite limited at the moment. And we're hopeful that that will continue to evolve and more languages will be added. So at the moment, there's the VoiceKeeper voice banking software, and that is currently available in 3 languages, so English, Hebrew, and Spanish. There's also the Acapella My Own voice banking software, and that's currently available in 22 languages. So you can either go to the the Acapella website, and they've got a list of the different languages that is available. Otherwise, potentially we can share that list with you and maybe add it to the end of the recording or the slide.
Thank you. That would be helpful, yes, to have that at the end. So just in general then, I'd like to ask all of your opinions on considerations for people when they're looking into voice banking. Emily, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, definitely. So some considerations, of course, are what language are you voice banking in? Based on that, you would have a more narrow focus on what can I look at. You might also want to consider what type of technology will I be using in the future, and will this voice be compatible with that? So I always want to think of using something that already is available on a lot of devices, because it's more likely that that company would be able to make their product more accessible for further products. So example, Acapella is available on all Windows-based speech generating devices. It's available on device, which is super important because you don't want something that's just cloud-based, or else they'd have to be connected to the internet. It's also available on Android apps and iOS apps. So that way, if you're very tied to one type of operating system, you can still use your device on that. One more consideration, and then I'll open the floor up, is I always like to consider, again, getting the whole family involved, asking them, Mom, Dad, what do I say that you're like, oh, that's my daughter? Or what is something I always say that bugs you, but you know you would miss it if I couldn't say that any longer. So I love getting everyone involved and asking them to help out.
Absolutely, yes. And I feel like that leads right into Alicia with that quality of life that you were talking about earlier. So would you like to comment on that as well?
Yes, so I absolutely agree with what Emily has said in terms of, particularly from an occupational therapy perspective, making sure you know how you want to use the voice or message banking in which devices potentially in the future. And if you are swayed towards one operating system, to make sure it's compatible. But I think it's also really important for the person with MND and their carers to be mindful of, when doing the recordings, to take their time, don't rush it, and make sure they're in an environment that's nice and accessible. They're able to be in a good position. So rather than laying down in bed, having someone either standing if they're able to, or seated in their wheelchair or seating system, so that they're going to produce the best quality voice that they can. And also then looking at the technology that's needed as well.
Yes, absolutely. And Monique?
So I think it's really important to work out what your communication goals and wishes are. So some people choose that this is just not for them, and that's okay. So they might prefer to spend the time doing something else. They might be okay with just using the generic voices that are available in speech generating devices. So I think it's important that you speak to the speech pathologist and work out, is this something that you really want to do? I think it's important to speak to the speech pathologist to work out if you do meet the speech pathology criteria to message and voice bank. It's important to consider whether you've got the time and the assistance also to be able to do message and voice banking. So in some instances, the message banking and voice banking can take 5 to 10 hours, even more. So whether you've got the ability to do that. And then lastly, depending on which part of the world you're living in, it's important to work out whether you have access to funding and to the communication technology to be able to do message banking and voice banking.
So as fabulous as this technology is, it sounds like there's actually some limitations to it as well.
Yes, there are. So voice banking, unfortunately, will never replace or repair your voice. It's going to be an approximation to your speech and how it sounds. And as Emily touched on a bit earlier, when we speak, our speech varies in intonation, and it reflects the emotion and how we're feeling. And when you do voice banking, it's not necessarily going to reflect that. Message banking it will, but not voice banking. So it does require lots of time and effort, so it can be quite fatiguing. And it does require assistance and support. So from family members, carers, and also a specialist speech pathologist too. And unfortunately, there are geographical limitations, so voice banking isn't available throughout the world, so in some locations.
Norman also commented on not stopping speech therapy. So Emily, would you like to comment on what can be done to help extend the way that people communicate?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to actually start with, while voice banking isn't available all over, my message banking website has just about every country that it does support, and that is a free website for anyone to use. So while it's not voice banking, it is message banking. So it is something that you can still record and save your messages, save those legacy messages. So if you want, you can go check that out at mymessagebanking.com. So based on continuing to speak, which we all want to encourage, there are so many strategies that will help you speak stronger and longer, such as use of like a mid-tech device as a voice amplifier. A voice amplifier is something that allows you to do less work throughout the day so you can speak longer. For example, you would speak soft and use a soft speech, and the voice amplifier would do the work for you. So it just makes your speech a lot louder, and then you can work on breathing more between your speech, between your words, and the voice amplifier will really carry it over. You can also work on some speech strategies such as over articulation. So really making sure that you're using all of the muscles and over articulating what you're saying. And that kind of makes your speech a little bit more clear. You can work on pacing. So that's slowing down your speech, something that I can even work on. But giving yourself more time to breathe between words, because your breath is really that energy for your speech. So it's important to breathe and use that breath to really make those words more clear and those sounds more clear. You can work on topic cueing or letter cueing. So for example, if someone's like, wait, what was that you said? You can point to a letter and tell them it starts with this letter and then try it again. So that gives them kind of like a cue of, oh, they're talking about this, or that kind of shows communication partner training is important too. So we're not just going to work with the individual who has ALS or MND, but we're going to work with everyone around them. So they're communication partners, because you want the communication partner to also take some of that communication burden. So it's important for them to look at their communication partner as they speak so that they can get the visual cues of what they're saying as well as hearing them. It's important for them to say, for the communication partner themselves, to repeat what they do understand that the person said. That way that person only has to fill in 1 or 2 words instead of repeating their entire phrase. We're trying to reduce fatigue here. So that's one way to reduce it. Finally, it's important to look around in the environment and make any environmental modifications. So are you in a dimly lit room? Let's add some light so that they can see what you're saying as well. Reducing distractions such as turning the television down or turning music off while they're speaking. Again, the whole purpose is to reduce that fatigue throughout the day. And I know I just went over a lot, but I'll just quickly summarize. A voice amplifier can help reduce fatigue, communication partner training, environmental modifications, and then using speech strategies.
Excellent. No, that was very clear. Thank you so much. There's so much going on right now with all this technology. Again, Norman commented that technology is constantly advancing. What does the future look like? What does the future hold? Alicia, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure the speech pathologist will probably have a lot more to say around the software, but from an occupational therapy point of view, that as Norman said, as technology advances, it becomes more mainstream. So it's a lot more accessible to being used in different devices in different settings. So as Norman mentioned, people often don't want a big mount and a big device right in their line of sight when they're out and about in the community in their wheelchair. So having an option to, if Norman can still use his hands, for example, he might choose to use a different device out in the community, whether it be an iPhone or an Android phone, something smaller and more portable, and then using an alternative within the home. And that's just as an example. But as technology evolves, it will be much more accessible, it'll be more cost effective from people from lower socioeconomic areas. It becomes more affordable and more accessible.
Yes, some very good points. Monique, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So like Alicia said, the software continues to evolve and improve. Already there's so many more software companies out there that can be considered, and they're trying to make the process much more efficient and also cheaper, so more accessible to a range of people. To my knowledge, there's a few projects going on around the world, so I just thought I'd touch on a couple of those. So one of them would be the Voice Repair Project, which is in collaboration with the US and the UK. And my understanding is that this project is looking at repairing a person's speech so that their synthetic voice sounds more like their previously healthy voice. There's also the International Human Voice Banking Project. And so this is currently going on in Boston, I believe, and patients with impaired speech or no speech are being able to, who can't voice bank, are being matched with potential voice donors who sound very similar to their previous voice. And then lastly, another project would be the Project Relate project in the UK with Google and a few other speech pathologists like Richard Cave. So they've developed an app and the app is currently available on Android phones. And basically as a person speaks, as they're speaking, the app will try to interpret what they're saying. So it will write the message down as well. And the communication partner or the listener can also read what the person is saying, and that will improve someone's communication effectiveness. So lots of exciting things happening around the world, and I think it's going to continue to evolve, which is great.
That is really exciting. I hope we can share all of those websites or places to look for those things afterwards, because I would also like to take a little time and check them out. Emily, anything else?
I think Alicia and Monique touched on just about everything. They did a great job. I think it's important to just always, as a clinician, always be aware of like what might be out there, and then checking to make sure, okay, does this meet the standards of what is already out there? And if so, what is unique about it? What is special about it? So I never want to introduce something to my clients until it does at least meet all those standards of what is available currently. Yeah, so it's exciting. There's so much stuff on the horizon. I think so many things that are going to make voice preservation just overall better. And like Alicia was mentioning, there's so many things that are commercially available and even free. So a lot of the communication apps that I have clients just test out in the beginning are free. It might even just be adjusting those accessibility settings on your phone or tablet so that you can continue using what you're using longer. So it's good to just look into what else is already out there, especially if you're in a place where you're unable to get one of those dedicated speech generating devices through insurance. There is a lot available.
Right. Starting with what you already have sometimes is a great place to start. That's an excellent point. Now we have a few questions coming in, but we have a few minutes before we do that. If I just could ask, do you have a top recommendation or tip or something you want to make sure you mention before we head into the questions? Emily, do you just want to continue on with your conversation?
Yeah, I think my top recommendation for clinicians, and then I'll say a top one for clients, but for clinicians is to just give the time and really use those good counseling skills to make sure you're listening and finding out what's most meaningful, what's most important, and then what are their biggest concerns, because the best thing you can give someone is time and a safe place to express what they are concerned with. And then for individuals seeking voice preservation, my top tip is to get started as soon as you can, and just know that like your voice is your personal identity, and that is something that we want to save and we want to preserve.
Excellent. Alicia?
Mine would be around making sure that we're focusing on what the person's goals are and what's going to improve their quality of life, and not necessarily looking at what a software or what a device can do to its maximum capacity and tailoring it towards what a person's needs are, not what something can do.
Oh, very important. Yes. Look at the individual, not the device. Yeah. Monique?
sorry. So like Emily said, I think it's really important to try and do it as soon as possible. And if you're unsure, my advice would be to speak to your speech pathologist, and to also go ahead and just do it, because in my opinion, you're better off doing it and having it there as a backup if you need it, than missing that opportunity and then not being able to use it.
Right. Right. Excellent point. Better to have it and not need it than not have it. So a few questions have come in. The first one is somebody asked if they've been told they're gene positive, so they tested positive for a genetic form of ALS MND. Is voice banking or message banking available to them before they've actually become diagnosed?
I would say yes. And a lot of softwares, you don't have to pay until you download the voice. So I would just check out which voice banking softwares you can record your voice and save it, and only pay if you need it. The same with mymessagebanking.com. That's available to everyone and it is free.
And then double dipping had been mentioned. So somebody asked what applications or software are needed for that.
The recommendation is to use a high quality portable microphone, such as like a Zoom H1N recorder. And that's just to capture your voice in the moment. It's really lightweight, so you can bring it with you, and it records in .wav format. So you do need something that would record in WAV format. Again, if you can't afford this, it's around $80, then it is possible to use an app that records in that format. It might not be as high quality, but it still will sound good. And then you would use that with a mymessagebanking.com or the PRC Saltillo message banking. And you can use VoiceKeeper, Acapella, and I believe there might be some other services that will allow a double dipping format, but those are the two I can think of right now.
Thank you. And this one might be for Alicia. Any suggestions if the person's not able to access the device physically and eye gaze is not an option?
So eye gaze is just one form of access. There's lots of other forms of access as well. So you might look at, depending on what your level of function is, you could be looking at something like inbuilt accessibility functions that are already in the device. You could be looking at switches and scanning. Switches don't have to be activated just with your hand. You can use your knee, your shoulder, foot, anything. You could also look at alternatives that are more cost effective. If you still have some head movement, you may look at using a head mouse or another alternative mouse. So there are lots and lots of different other access methods other than just eye gaze.
Right. And I think speaking to your occupational therapist or meeting with your occupational therapist is an excellent way to look at some of those alternative access options. The next question is, what are the qualifying criteria that have been referred to in order to do voice banking?
So speech pathologists do have a range of tests that they can use to measure your speaking rate. So ideally, we want to try and capture your normal speaking rate. So you want to do it before your speech drops to 125 words per minute or less. And we know that once your speaking rate does drop to below 125 words per minute or less, that it will usually see a rapid decline in speech quality and speech clarity as well. So ideally, you want to be able to do all your your message banking and your voice banking before it gets to that point.
Thank you. And then Jane Haley is sharing with us that Speak Unique is the voice banking in Scotland, and MND Scotland will pay for people with MND to have this done in Scotland. And I know that kind of service is available in different countries, not all countries available, obviously, but perhaps in the end, that's also something that we can put together, is what are the options in different alliance organization countries. And in fact, Connie is asking, please send all the systems and projects and everything where available. I think that's all the questions. Let me double and triple check. Nothing's come through on Facebook. So thank you all so much for being this excellent panel on voice banking and voice messaging. There may be other questions that come through in the future, so we'll pass them on to you, as well as, again, afterwards we'll share all the resources that people have provided. Is there anything else you would like to, any comments anyone would like to make before we sign off? And I will just say thank you to all of you, as well as to Norman.
Yeah, so Speak Unique, one more unique thing about it is that they do have a voice repair service. So if you do have some signs of dysarthria and like such as hypernasality, they can repair your voice. Not your regular speaking voice, but they can repair the synthetic voice to make it sound a little bit more like you. And I forgot to mention that earlier, but I thought that's a great service they have.
Monique or Alicia, any final comments? All right. Kathy, do you come back on?
I will come back on just to say thank you to you as well, Sarah, and to Alicia, Monique, Emily, and Norman for their comments today and answering the questions, sorry. So thanks to each of you, and have a great day, evening, wherever you are in the world.